Hi, I'm Bill Perkins. Welcome to Compass TV. Compass is a nonprofit ministry that defends the accuracy of the Bible from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22. So if you love the Lord, love your Bible, and love to learn, you're going to love this video presentation. There's a saying, opposites attract, and it's true, especially in marriage. You usually see people fall in love with someone very much their opposite. And there's a good reason. A biblical reason. You see, man was first made in God's image from scratch. But when he made woman, he made her from the man. So really, God made Adam, Eve first, and then separated his creation into two people. When we get married, the two halves come together as one. We're far better off as a couple, like the Lord designed. Naturally, being mostly opposites, our marriage differences sometimes cause tension. So understanding these differences give us insight on how to respond. Dave Moore, in one of the funniest presentations in the history of Stealing the Mind, walks through these differences between man and woman. Enjoy How to Communicate with a Rottweiler by David Moore.
So as we go through this in a few minutes, you may be wondering how to talk to a Rottweiler. What is that doing at a Stealing the Mind conference subject? And some of you might be thinking, well, this conference has just gone to the dogs. And yet what I hope to communicate to you in the next few minutes is this magnificent way that God has hardwired us as people. This talk this afternoon is about understanding and appreciating the people around you. Improving communication skills because we really do speak different languages, and how to appreciate people who are kind of weird. Do you know any weird people? Just look around. Have you ever looked at somebody and thought, why can't you be normal like me? I think we've all had those moments. A little guy named Steven had a moment like that when he was sitting at his desk and at home. He's trying to write a report for a class. He couldn't come up with an opening sentence, so he jumped up and he ran into the kitchen where his mom was cooking dinner. He said, "Hey, Mom, how was it that I was born?" And she wasn't about to touch this birds and bees kind of subject at that particular time. She said, "Oh, the stork brought you, dear." And he nodded and he moved into the living room where Grandma was and says, "Hey, Grandma, how was it that Mom was born?" Well, Grandma wasn't going to touch the subject either. She said, "Well, the stork brought her." "Huh. Well, Grandma, how was it you were born?" "Well, Stephen, the stork brought me too." So Stephen perked up and ran into his room, sat down and wrote the opening line of his paper. "There hasn't been a normal birth in our family for 3 generations. The truth is, men and women, normal is a setting on the dryer, and it doesn't really apply to people at all. And you see, I found in my life and work and business that there are 3 kinds of people in the world. There are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and there are those who say, "What happened?" And the difference between those 3 responses really is rooted in your understanding of people and their personalities. And so today, I want to talk about the concept of being a person who makes things happen in your marriage, in your family, with your kids, in your business, in your society. Because the better you can understand and network with those people around you, the better you are at 1, getting along, 2, communicating the gospel, 3, having fun in life. Life does not have to be a dogfight all the time. And yet for many, it is a series of dogfights. And so for some of you this afternoon, this may be the beginning of a whole new level of understanding yourself. I remember when I first came across this concept about 25 years ago, I felt such a relief because I was a youth pastor, and I would run with the kids all day long and do the thing, and when church was over at that Wednesday night meeting, I just was exhausted and wanted to go home, and the other youth sponsors were all going, "Let's go out to hamburgers." I'm going, I can't. And I thought for years there was something wrong with me, that I didn't belong in the ministry because I just was emotionally exhausted because I didn't understand how God hardwired me, what energized me and what drained me. And some of you today are going to learn something about accepting the people that you live with. And I hope that you'll pick up on some better foundations of how do you talk to those Rottweiler type people and those St. Bernard type people and so forth. Because in this world, thank God, He created us with 4 basic patterns. And how you interact with those 4 basic personality patterns will determine how well you fulfill this command. Jesus said, "A new command I give to you, love one another." How much? "As I have loved you, so you," what's that next word? must love one another. You can't love as Jesus loved if you think people are weird. That's why you've got to understand and appreciate those differences. And rather than trying to fix people, which is what we always try to do, don't we? Gentlemen, when you got married, you became a project, didn't you? She took off the wedding deal, put on the fix-it hat, and you're a project. And men do the same thing. And we do it to our kids. We instinctively try to recreate people to think like us, feel like us, and the process fails before it ever gets going because no amount of ranting or raving can change the way God hardwired you. But I tell you what it will do. It'll drive a wedge of dissension between you. It'll create friction at a church. It'll create friction at a school. It'll ruin relationships. It's like the father who came home one afternoon, 3 o'clock, exhausted from work. Here's his 18-year-old son laying on the couch, eating Doritos and watching television. And this frustrated dad looked at that lazy boy and he said, do you know that when Lincoln was your age, he was reading books and writing papers? And the kid put down his Doritos for a moment and said, yeah, and when Lincoln was your age, he was president of the United States. You see, we just can't fix people. That's God's job. And as soon as we try to take over the job of God, it just doesn't work. Here's how the Apostle Paul put it in Colossians chapter 3. He said, since God chose you to be holy people whom he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. You must make allowances for each other's faults and forgive the person who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. And the most important piece of clothing that you must wear is love. Love is what binds us all together in perfect harmony. Don't miss verse 13 that said, you must make allowances for each other. We get into the doghouse with each other when we assume that they see the world the way we do. They don't. When we assume that they communicate the way we do, they don't. Churches have gone to war with one another over the assumption that, well, surely you see the scriptures the way I do. They don't. And so my hope today is to take some complicated, time-proven science of the human spirit that dates all the way back to 1000 BCs with the Greeks, and nearly every major culture has divided people into these 4 basic groups, and so there's great science, proven science behind it. But the problem is, when science-type people try to describe it, it becomes so complicated, you can't remember it. Because they talk about phlegmatics and artesians and sanguines and guardians and scorpions and turtle doves, and it just gets really crazy. So I've taken for the last 5 years really good science with the basis of the scripture beneath it, nothing that contradicts scripture, of course. And what I've done is I've put the whole thing into the world of dogs, which you may think is kind of weird, but you know what? There are 4 kinds of dogs in this world that resemble people a lot. This is a St. Bernard. 38% of people have a personality given them by God that's very much like a St. Bernard. Duty, service, trudging into the snow to save people, and so forth. These are very hard animals to get along with, by the way. Then, 38% of people are puppies. Now, these are the most fun animals on the planet. They're the ones that'll wag their tail, and they'll be off in one direction, and they'll find something more fun, and they're off in that direction. So they're great. They're just wonderful, wonderful. Unless they work for you. And some people are a whole lot like golden retrievers. 12% of the population. Kind, loving, gracious, generous people. I have 2 in my family. And then some are like Rottweilers. Fortunately, only 8% of the population from the scientific world falls into this category. Now, think about this for a moment. You've got those 4 basic breeds, and we all come together, and we don't always agree. And sometimes there's little dog fights, and sometimes there's church splits, and sometimes there's dads trying to recreate their son in their own image, trying to make a Rottweiler out of a golden retriever. Solomon said, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. For years, Bible theologians have said, well, that means that if you take them to church and Sunday school, that when they're old, they'll still love Jesus. Wrong. Not a Hebrew theologian on the planet to tell you that. That verse says, in the way that they should go, meaning you understand their personality and you cooperate with it. God gave them that personality, not you. And then it says, and according to their tastes, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. What? The relationship. You want to keep your wife on your team and your children on your team, and then we have to wonderfully fulfill this verse, understand each other, make allowances for each other. So that's kind of the background of where we're going. Now let me talk about these 4 dogs for just a minute, and we'll run from there. The first group that we'll talk about are the St. Bernards. With each of these, I'm going to give you a couple of words that you can just jot down if you'd like to that kind of characterize these St. Bernards, because before you can ever really work with them, you got to understand them. St. Bernards are the salt of the earth kind of people. They are the culture, the background of our culture. At their very core, they are reliable. They crave to contribute. Just as you can imagine, remember the dogs trudging off into the snow with their little glass of whiskey to save some lost person? That's the St. Bernards. Duty, honor, structure. They have a by-the-book attitude because they believe that it is going by the book, the rules, that you make progress in life. Now, there are some famous St. Bernards that might give you an idea. You've got George Washington, Mother Teresa, Colin Powell, Vince Lombardi, Billy Graham, Judge Judy, Glenn Beck, perhaps most important, Martha Stewart and Hillary Clinton. Those are all St. Bernards who believe that structure and rules and regulations, that's how the world runs. Now, there are some of you here who think rules are made to be broken, huh? Oh, you might not say it at a church conference, but when that sign says 65 on the freeway, you're doing 72. These St. Bernards have a wonderful word to describe them. Number one, if you want to jot it down, servants. They are steady, solid servants of society. They find significance in personal sacrifice and in doing their duty. They're sensible, self-sacrificing kinds of people. They're dependable. They're like the Boy Scouts of America. In fact, it was a Boy Scout that founded St. Bernard, who founded the Boy Scouts, and the motto, always be prepared, was written by a St. Bernard because they see the world through those kinds of eyes. And consequently, they're very systematic in the way they do things. At work, they're always list makers, and they're schedule-oriented. In fact, they'll generally make a list, and if they do something that's not on the list, they'll write on the list just to get to check it off. They are detail-oriented, persistence about the details. They love charts and graphs, and they claim to hate red tape, but the truth is they invented red tape. And the bigger the bureaucracy, the more St. Bernards you'll find there. In fact, the school system is populated by, run by, and orchestrated by, take a wild guess, St. Bernards, which is why puppies don't do so well in a St. Bernard school system. The third word to jot down is savers and sustainers. You see, they love to cultivate and maintain social groups. That's very important to them. They conserve heritage and tradition becomes more important with time for a St. Bernard. When they're confronted with a problem, guess what they do? They look to the past for a solution. How many times have you heard Glenn Beck say that? Do you know who he is? Okay, guys. When confronted with a problem, they look to the past, and they were the first ones who ever coined the little phrase, those were the good old days. And we've always done it this way, which is what I've always said were the last 7 words of the church. But at any rate, they have this hunger to belong. And they believe that belonging has to be earned. And so St. Bernards are the ones who care about titles, degrees, achievements, acknowledgments. If you go into their office, they'll have all their awards on the wall and all framed and all, nice looking. They've become ministers and bankers and medical personnel and accountants and city employees and government workers. And, of course, I told you earlier about teachers. So those are 3 wonderful issues, aren't they? Servants, they're systematic, they're savers and sustainers. We need that. But there are some downsides. And the downsides are, well, they tend to have a critical streak. St. Bernards, by nature, notice what's wrong, and they are instinctively pessimistic. Some of you know some St. Bernards, I can tell right now. They can visualize the goal, but the goal often gets clouded with, yeah, but. Yeah, but. They can also visualize what the perfect would look like, but they get caught up in the process. I mean, think about the school systems. They know what that student should look like, but 14,000 pages of bureaucracy later just don't quite get there because you get hung up in the process. And so if you're a St. Bernard, you got to go to obedience school on this one and make sure that you keep the goals right out there and that they're functioning and that you don't find yourself just throwing up your hands with the red tape. And do you know that St. Bernards, of all the breeds, marry later in life and they break off their engagements more often than any other breed? You know why? They start dating somebody, they've got their ideal out there. As they get to know them and see the details, oh, I'm out of here. Another word to jot down, conflicted. By this, they tend to have a fair level of conflict in their lives, partly due to being introspective and overanalyzing a lot of things. And they are quicker to go through a pity party, which leads to depression sometimes, because, think about it, here's the ideal, they know what it looks like, and those quiet moments when they look at themselves, I'm not quite there. And so they tend to have a moody streak, and they tend to remember the negative. They tend to gravitate towards persecution complex because they almost enjoy being hurt because the role of a martyr adds to their value. And if you're not a St. Bernard, you don't understand that. If you are, and you're sitting there going, oh, yeah, I kind of understand this. My dad was that. A minister, and he just loved after church to go, well, these are the last days. People don't appreciate us who give our lives to ministry like these. And he goes, wah. So there's a third word, because we got to move fast. Craving. They need plenty of affirmation. Since they struggle with this self-esteem a little bit more than the other breeds, and have a strong desire to be loved and appreciated, they'll never tell you that. Because when others fail to express that gratitude, they get stuck between, well, I am doing my duty, and a thank you would have been nice. And if you fail to appreciate a St. Bernard long enough, it'll cost you. Because while they aren't typically explosive, they won't forget ingratitude, and when the opportunity presents itself, they will bite. So how in the world do you talk to a St. Bernard, which is kind of the theme that we started running with? Well, logics, systematic. If it's a son or a daughter, you make sure you walk through the A, B, C, D, so forth. You don't jump to the Z and tell them to figure it out. When you're sharing the gospel with a St. Bernard, focus on Jesus' ability to stay focused when he came to earth. He had a single purpose, and although many tried to sidetrack him from one point to another point, he never got sidetracked. He remained focused on the central challenge, and that was a plan to bring salvation to people like you and me. Now, of course, the Holy Spirit's the one who does the conversion. But I found a lot of times we build walls better than we build bridges. Like the gentleman earlier, I wasn't in here, but I heard it outside, where he was saying he used to chase people down the street with a Bible or something. Well, could the Holy Spirit use that? Maybe, but if we can cooperate with the personality and deliver a message that is sweet to their ears, how much more does it just give God the Spirit the opportunity to really touch their lives? So that's the St. Bernards. Anybody want to admit they're a St. Bernard? A few of you. Any of you ever taken the Myers-Briggs temperament analysis? Okay, those of you who are SJs, SJs are St. Bernards. But isn't it more fun to be compared to a St. Bernard than a Zh? That's my guess at an SJ. Second group, Golden Retrievers. Golden Retrievers make up 12% of the population. Now, if the Boy Scouts if the St. Bernards are the Boy Scouts of society, then the Goldens would be like the best friends of society. They cannot really be understood by any of the other three personality breeds, so they are often more loved than understood. They are the easygoing, cream of the crop people, supportive, peace-loving, empathetic, the best breed of the bunch in terms of easy to get along with. There was a police officer in Florida, I think it was 2 years ago, who answered a 911 call. There was a frantic older lady who had called claiming that her steering wheel had been stolen from her car. And so the police officer showed up. He happened to be a golden retriever. He realized that the lady was sitting in the back seat. So the three different personalities would respond very differently to the situation. A St. Bernard would say, "Ma'am, come with me. The fact is, you're sitting in the back seat." A Rottweiler would say something like, "Are you kidding me?" A puppy would say, "Just stay in the back seat. I want to drive anyway." But a golden retriever would be gracious, kind, and empathetic, which he was. Some famous Goldens: Bill Cosby, Gandhi, Ronald Reagan, Martin Luther King, Princess Diana, Michael Jackson, and of course our president, whatever his name is, Hussein Obama or something like that. Yes, sir. Sorry. I do have a CD out there, The Abomination of America, if you're interested. Let me tell you about 3 words to jot down here. Number 1, supportive. By their nature, the Golden's life must have meaning. They have a craving to encourage and help someone. They tend to romanticize experiences and relationships. In fact, when it comes to love and romance, they are hopeless romantics. They aren't just looking for life partners. No, they're looking for a soulmate. In fact, they coined the phrase soulmate. And they're able to see the potential good in people beyond obvious flaws. Their default mode is to always downplay the shortcomings of others, overlook those flaws, and explain them away if possible, which means many times golden retrievers make pretty bad personal choices because they get stuck in bad situations. But since they value people, they become rescuers, rebuilders of others. They can get into the shoes of another person more easily than any other personalities. In fact, sometimes so much so that they risk losing their own identity in someone else or in a cause or a project. They're supportive and they are significant. Whatever they do has to have significance. They become the most loyal friends. They're people. They're extremely supportive, genuinely love others. Typically compassionate and accepting. And when they are engaging in life, well, let me give you an illustration. My son is a golden retriever. I am a Rottweiler. When my son was playing Little League, one day I watched him hit a ground ball, base hit. He's on first base. The guy behind him hit a ground ball to the shortstop. So Tyson's running towards second base. Threw the ball to second base, double play. As my little golden retriever son is walking off the field, I put my arm around him and I said, "Hey, Tyson, your job is to break up the double play. Take out the second baseman. You cannot leave him standing." And he looked up at me and he said, "But Daddy's my friend." Son, during the game, you don't have any friends on the other team. He said, I kid you not, this is all real. He said, excuse me, "Geez, Dad, it's just a game." I said, "Yeah, and the point is to win." And he said, "The point is to have fun." I said, "It's no fun if you don't win." There is the classic golden retriever, supportive of the other team, just looking for some significance. And then the third thing to jot down is that they are seekers of peace. Conflict for them is very painful. They crave peace, almost at any cost. This makes them very diplomatic and unabrasive. They have an uncanny ability to bring people together. They're great negotiators. Although they rarely volunteer for things, when pressed into leadership, they do make great leaders. They are typically extremely good communicators, at least if they have a teleprompter. They are great at persuasion, at inspiration. It's second nature to them. And they are naturals at persuading others without pushing them. Now, hopefully, you can start to see how this is going to play out. I mean, if there is a St. Bernard parent who tries to force a golden into that mold, you violate the scriptures from Solomon and drive a wedge between the two that sometimes lasts for a lifetime. Now, there are some pitfalls for the golden retrievers. 3 words for you to jot down if you'd like to. The first word to jot down is stressed. Goldens are very susceptible to worry about the things that are close to them. As you can imagine, this is especially true in relationships. When someone is late and doesn't call, the golden stresses out and worries. They will naturally visualize the worst. Oh, they must have been in a car accident. Oh, probably the bridge collapsed upon them. Oh, she was carjacked. I knew she shouldn't have gone to L.A., and on it goes. The other 3 breeds can kind of reason that away, but not the golden. They may not sleep all night if somebody doesn't call and check in. And they tend to care about those that are close to them, so they will by nature keep a very short leash on those around them because they want to feel connected. This becomes a problem. Now, Goldens love to have a golden short leash, like my son and my wife are both Goldens, and they have a 24-hour rule. Never go more than 24 hours without calling each other. Well, they both like that. You start calling me all the time, I don't want a leash. No Rottweiler wants a leash. So understanding that becomes very helpful. So they tend to have stress because they can't quite understand why everybody else doesn't want to stand around and sing Kumbaya with them. All right? Second word to jot down, they are self-depreciating. You see, they tend to underestimate their abilities. When you tell a golden, that was a great job, they'll immediately come back with, well, you know, and they'll tell you how it could have been better. If you compliment them, they just have a hard time fully accepting that. And here, they need to go to obedience school. They need to just learn to say thank you and really appreciate that. And sometimes those closest to them feel so frustrated because they can see the raw talent in this golden that's never fully tapped or utilized. And so they also underestimate their contributions to others, and they'll often feel like, you know, I should have done more. I could have done more. And then the third pitfall is stubbornness. Now, this may sound a little strange to you, but while they are usually easygoing, caring, sensible people, every golden has a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde side. I've seen this in my family numerous times. I remember one day Tyson was playing at McDonald's, and while he was getting ready to go up the ladder, a bigger kid climbed up the ladder behind him and spin him around and cut in front of him. And, his golden retriever mother saw this, and by the time that kid got from the top of the slide to the bottom of the slide, she was there to meet him. Both hands around this kid's shirt collar, shook him and said, "Don't you ever touch my son." Now, this kid's a stranger, and there are witnesses. And McDonald's has just gone, oh. And so she dusted the little guy off, went back to her chair, and thought, where did that come from? Well, I'll tell you where it comes from. You step on the cherished values of a golden, and they come unglued. Because the relationship to whatever it is they value is so significant to them, they can't stand the idea of somebody stepping on it. And so how do you talk to a golden? Always talk relationally. Keep focused on the relationship because that's what goldens care about. When sharing the gospel, focus upon the intimacy of Jesus. How he loved people, how he was so non-judgmental, how he always had time for the individual. He was gracious beyond belief, and he loves you, and he wants to have an intimate relationship with you. And a golden will just understand that and embrace it. Well, let's look at the third group because I don't know what time it is. Are we doing okay on time, whoever's in charge? Okay. Rottweilers. I know a lot about these creatures. I've been to obedience school my whole life. If St. Bernards are the Boy Scouts and if Goldens are the best friends, then the Rottweilers, they're the builders. They are driven individuals. They have a compulsion for competence and for personal freedom. You put a Golden on a leash and they'll love you for the attention. You put a St. Bernard and they'll thank you for the structure. You put a puppy on a leash, he'll just get tangled up. You put a Rottweiler on a leash and he'll bite and run. And unfortunately, Rottweilers tend to get a really bad rap because in the movies and in the comics and jokes, they're always portrayed as these big, mean dogs, and they really aren't. I owned one for several years. That's why I know how this thing works. But a Rottweiler has a strong external demeanor about him that's just naturally intimidating. For my whole 35 years in the ministry, I would hear the same thing. Dave is so unapproachable. Famous Rottweilers, Napoleon, Bill Gates, his superior, Steve Jobs, John Wayne, Douglas MacArthur, Walt Disney, Thomas Edison, and most famous, Adolf Hitler. These Rottweilers are builders of things. And so 3 words to jot down for them. 1, self-starters. If you have a Rottweiler child, you will never have to tell them to get their homework done because they're going to just do it. They may not like it, but they'll do it. They are driven. They are focused. They're typically optimistic, coolly objective, almost never nervous, goal-driven creatures. And anything that hinders them from their goal is held in contempt. They are programmed to be positive, proactive self-starters. Second word, strategic planners. They are skilled at strategic analysis. They have an uncanny ability to take complicated things and make them understandable. They have zero interest in theory unless it translates to reality. If it isn't relative, they aren't interested. My most difficult class in college, far and away, was philosophy. Because as a Rottweiler, I sat there day after day after day saying, what does this have to do with anything? My first assignment in philosophy was to write a paper on the subject, how do you know that you are not now asleep and dreaming? I went home and I wrote several paragraphs, and it's like, you can't know, so who cares? So I ended my paper with, I must be dreaming because this assignment is a nightmare. I really thought that was pretty creative. I'd get a pretty good grade. I got an F. In fact, I got an F in the class. So you know what a Rottweiler does? Retakes it and gets what? I told them all the stupid stuff they wanted to know. Got the A. Strivers. Third thing to jot down about them. They are typically successful in whatever they do, not because they're more gifted, not because they're smarter, but because they are relentless. So Rottweilers typically rise to positions of leadership. They find it very easy to make decisions for themselves, and for anyone who hesitates to make a decision, they'll make it for them. They thrive on work, they lose themselves in work, even their playtime is work. So recreation is never recreation, it is a driven exercise to improve. They have a mental stopwatch going all the time so that they have to play this hole of golf better than they played it the last time they played it. They've got to get down this hill skiing faster than the last time they did, or they've got to have better form. It's just a mental stopwatch. Now, those are the good points. The pitfalls, they are stubborn. The word quit is not in the vocabulary. Stubbornness won't allow them to give up or give in, and when they are losing, they will keep on fighting, and the more you oppose them, the more tenacious they become. If you oppose a St. Bernard, he'll pull out the operations book and tell you these are the rules. If you oppose a golden, they'll lick your hand and seek peace. If you oppose a puppy, he'll lift his leg on your shoe. But if you oppose a Rottweiler, you're in for a dogfight. They're stoic. Rottweilers often appear to be emotionally stunted. They have little patience for emotional appeals and irrelevant, irrational arguments. They aren't by nature complimentary. That requires obedience school. They remain calm and collected, are rarely expressive, and in the stress of a situation, the more stressful it is, the more focused they become. This focus can lead them to run over people and not even know it because they're blind to all the little things going on around them. Perfect example. I had a neighbor named Jack. Jack loved my dog, Carbon. That's him up there with the butterfly in his mouth. You probably can't see that, but he just caught it and thought, oops. whenever Jack would go to In-N-Out Burger, he would always bring one home for Carbon. Carbon knew this. So Carbon's out in the front yard one day. He's about a 90-pound, right? And Jack jumped out of his car, held up In-N-Out Burger. Hey, Carbon! That dog made a beeline for him. Jack knelt down like this, in order to greet him. He leaped into the air, grabbed the hamburger, hit Jack in the head, and knocked him cold. Wolfed down the hamburger, and then looked at Jack like, what's wrong? Now, Rottweiler people are like that, focused, good, and they'll run over folks, and they'll look back at the carcasses and go, what? Third word to jot down, solo. Rottweilers have a strong desire for privacy. And so it requires some obedience school for them to realize that they need to be more than just private. While they are often thrust in the limelight because of their skills, they prefer privacy. And the best of times for them is when they're alone, thinking, quiet, privately, reflecting upon who they are, what they're doing, where they're going, what they're working on. So how do you talk to a Rottweiler? Well, you better have plenty of facts and express them perfectly. Because if you get some of the details wrong, they'll write you off. My instinct, when people come and criticize me, the first thing I do is check their credentials. Let's see, are you qualified to be talking through? And move on. When sharing the gospel with a Rottweiler, focus on the facts of what Jesus did. Focus on the prophecies that gave him an address and time. Know your apologetics. You've got to know apologetics to deal with a Rottweiler and use them and get them into understanding the grand plan of the gospel with a whole slew of perfectly lined up deals that God did just so that you, Mr. Rottweiler, would have a reason to believe. And then the last group, the puppies. The puppies are these fun-going, easy to go get along with, action-loving, adaptable, daring people. 38% of the population. If the St. Bernards are the Boy Scouts, if the Goldens are the Friends, if the Rottweilers are the builders, well, puppies, they're the bikers. And some of the famous ones of history, George Bush, Franklin Roosevelt, JFK, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, General Patton, and would you believe Robbie Knievel, Johnny Carson, Hugh Hefner, Donald Trump, Madonna, Elvis. And I've neglected to tell you some New Testament counterparts on these other because I'm trying to get through this so fast. But in the New Testament, Mark was obviously a puppy, all about action. If you read his gospel, and Jesus went straightway to, and shortest gospel, fastest, that's the way they work. Peter, obviously a puppy, the first to speak, spoke more often, and usually got it wrong. 3 words to jot down. First word, playful. Puppies are people of action. They are born for action. And that action doesn't have to be, towards any particular end in mind. It's just because the action is the end. It's like the little boy who was a little puppy, and he was invited to a wedding to be the ring bearer. He was so thrilled to be the ring bearer. So when he got to the wedding, and everyone's there in the church, he's walking down the aisle, and he turns to the left, and he goes, "Rah!" Walked a couple more steps, "Rah! Rah!" By the time he got to the front, the whole church is in tears, laughing, and the pastor bends down and says, "Son, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm being the ring bearer." See, that's a puppy. They love to shoot the gun. They want to fly the plane. They want to move the bulldozer. They want to honk the horn. They want to play the instruments. They are the high rollers. They win big. They lose big. And unlike St. Bernards, who are savers, puppies are always spenders. They always owe more, usually, than they own. They gravitate to the jobs where there's action. So they love working on the edge. The racing world's full of puppies. Commercial divers, contact sports, firefighters, EMTs, mercenary soldiers. You tie them to a 9-to-5 desk job, might as well put them in prison because they're playful. Second thing is they're positive. They are personable and positive people. They can come up with immediate solutions. They can put up with discomfort and pain longer than any of the other temperaments. Setbacks for them are only temporary because it allows them to bounce back when others wouldn't. And crisis management is their forte. They love problems, and they're great problem solvers. In fact, sometimes they create problems just so they can solve them. Which is the third thing, to just jot it down to a positive. Great problem solvers. And pitfalls? Well, they've got a few. One is impatience. I have a son-in-law who's the CEO of a multinational company, and he is the most impatient person on the planet. They want everything done right now because it's fun to have it done right now. So they're always in a hurry, and watch this, they're always late. Because while they're in a hurry to get to point A, something at point B is of interest. So it's just like a puppy. They often get labeled undependable, undisciplined. They often look like procrastinators because if they're not interested in it, they're just not going to get it done. So they rarely finish anything that is boring or predictable. And I tell you what, when you confront them on it, they can make up an excuse on the spot that is so good that you'll go, well, yeah, it makes sense. Because they are great at embellishment. Oh, can they tell stories? Puppy speech is always colorful with vivid descriptions. And when they retell a story, they're actually reliving the experience. And telling it is as much fun as living it. And more often than not, puppies will tell you the same story over and over again because they're just having such a great time telling it. And the second thing they often do, they embellish the story because it has to be exciting. So it's got to get a little better and a little better. This puppy in my family, I hope he never sees this tape or anything. He'll tell a story to one family member. 3 days later, one of us will hear the story, and we'll just crack up because, wait a minute, that's not the same story. Well, it's kind of the same. No, it is heavily embellished. That just comes natural for all of them. So they need some obedience school on that one. And then the third pitfall is they're impulsive. They feel guilty when they're not impulsive. It's hardwired into them. So they leap before they look. They speak before they think. The little phrase, when all else fails, read the directions. Well, that was written by a puppy for a puppy. Deadlines are just general guidelines. Budgets and financial plans are unwelcome intrusions into the life of the puppy. If they had it their way, they would do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I'll close with a perfect story. Maybe you've heard the story before of Larry Walters. Larry is an extreme puppy, and he was bored on a weekend. So he went to the Army Navy surplus store and purchased 45 weather balloons and several tanks of helium. Took them back home, filled these balloons with helium, strapped them to a lawn chair, which was tied or anchored to the bumper of his Jeep, and got himself a six-pack, a couple of sandwiches, and a pellet gun, sat down in the chair, cut it loose from the truck, and thought that he would just float up and kind of experience the neighborhood. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. When he cut the cord, the thing shot up so fast. He thought he was going to 30 feet. Oh, no. He went to 30, to 100, to 300. He leveled off at 11,000 square feet. Now, the pellet gun was to shoot the balloons one at a time to descend back to Earth, but 11,000 feet, he was afraid to do anything, so he sat there and drifted for 14 hours, and you know he loved every minute of it, until he drifted into the flight path for Los Angeles International Airport. And it was a United Airlines pilot who first radioed the tower claiming that there is an armed man in a lounge chair at 11,000 feet. Classic puppy. So a helicopter was dispatched, and they ultimately got him down. He was led away in handcuffs, and as they were leading him away, a reporter asked him, "Larry, what were you thinking?" The puppy wasn't thinking. He nonchalantly said, "A man just can't sit around on a Saturday afternoon." So how do you talk to a puppy? Oh, action, spontaneity, problem solving. When sharing the gospel, focus on the fact that Jesus was a taker of action. He didn't just sit back, he healed the sick. He didn't say, go find some dinner, I'll feed you. He walked on water. And ultimately, he resolved the problem of a holy God and unholy people by doing what? Taking action. I will deal with this and I will give my life. He put his life on the line in order to change the lives of everyone else. And so the conclusion to all this, well, when we fail to understand these differences, several things happen. One, we try to recreate others in our own image. That process fails because nobody wants to be a project. Or we label them weird or abnormal or wrong, which leads to a lot of dog fights. When what's really needed is a high degree of insight, a deep commitment to make allowances for one another as we were instructed to do in the scriptures. And then when we do that, suddenly we can start to embrace those differences. They become points of humor and interest rather than conflict and hatred. And as we begin to love as Jesus loved, guess what we become? Fulfilled, abundant life, and we finally present a good image of a person of faith to the world. And so, Father, I just close this afternoon saying thank you for giving us and giving much wiser people than myself the insights into these four basic personalities. Help us to take these concepts, make them very real, learn a little more about them, and then apply them to our world of faith and to our church and to our families, our businesses and neighbors, and so that we can really become the visible representative of the invisible God who loves with an unfailing love. And we will thank you for the opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.